The grimdark undead from space have had their faction preview. It more or less follows the same beats of the previous ones. Here's the army rule, perhaps a detachment rule, a few iconic units, maybe the biggest gun in the faction, a big cheese character, and a stratagem. Let's take a look. Reanimation Protocols serves as the Necrons Army rule. Not really a surprise. Right off the bat, we can see the rule incorporates the functionality of 9th edition's Living Metal in a rather elegant fashion. In your command phase, each unit rolls a reanimation value of D3. Each reanimated wound is resolved individually. If a unit has a model which has lost wounds, that model regains a lost wound. If a unit has all models at their full wounds, but has lost models, one model is returned to the unit with one wound remaining. This is loads better than it was in 9th edition, as now your units of multi-wound models are no longer disadvantaged when it comes to the army rule. However, I don't want to be too kind to GW. This is very, duh, as far as rules updates go. Though I'll add having reanimation return to the command phase in a more reliable capacity, rather than having it be less reliable but coming into effect each time a unit is attacked as per 9th edition is much better. The 9th edition version of Reanimation Protocols is such a janky mechanic. That potential for free movement across the board based on hot rolling discourages player interaction. Essentially, it creates room for the opposing player to be punished for interacting with their enemy, which I feel is fundamentally poor design. It's also bizarre as hell for a Necron to be destroyed from the back of a unit, to then be reanimated and then teleported 12 inches to the front of a unit. Unless you're playing Nephric. You know, the dynasty with unique teleportation technology which impacts how they wage war compared to other Necron dynasties. But I guess rip subfactions. Command protocols have been previewed, returning as the detachment rule for the Awakened Dynasty detachment. If you have a character leading a unit, that unit gains +1 to hit. This is a significant efficiency boost, and it encourages a lot of characters to be present in a Necron army, which evokes their nodal command hierarchy, a nice win for rules abstracting narrative. Initially, I was pretty unenthused, as the read of this on its own seemed purely oriented towards efficiency, which is a loss as far as the flexibility potential offered by the previous command protocols of 9th edition, and the nodal command structure they evoke from the lore. However, what this rule doesn't tell you is that at least certain stratagems affect units stronger when they are led by a character. That's a big deal. GW is just terrible at writing rules in a way that demonstrates how those rules are designed to synergize and interact. Essentially, they're terrible at demonstrating how a toolkit works. Older codices are famous for this. You'll have a rule somewhere, and you have to sift through pages and pages to find all the points of synergy. And this faction focus follows in suit. Instead of this stratagem being right underneath the rule it serves to contextualize, it's at the bottom of the article. This incompetence is actually quite annoying. Excuse the digression, but it now occurs to me the biggest loss in how new reanimation protocols function is that there is now more room for a unit to be wiped before your command phase occurs, and in turn, claim no benefit from your army rule. Now personally, I would hope tools like the Resurrection Orb or the Protocol of the Undying Legions, now likely a stratagem, would allow you to circumvent that possibility. So why the fuck? Why would Warhammer Community preview this stratagem, rather than the Protocol of the Undying Legions, which would likely better illustrate how the army rule can be leveraged? See what I mean about terrible communication of game mechanics? As for the stratagem itself, yeah, it's pretty neat. We can see the Awakened Dynasty detachment as representing the various command protocols we are familiar with through its stratagems. Stratagems which have a greater effect while characters are leading units. Moving over to units, we got the Monolith. As we all expected, the Monolith is a big chungus. 20 wounds at toughness 14, and a beefy obsec value of 8. Here's the Land Raider for context. Offensively, it has a tasteful complement of profiles as well. The Death Ray has more AP than the Raider's Godhammer Last Cannons, but it also has sustained hits D3, so critical hits can generate at least 1, but max 3 extra hits, which obviously boosts the potency of this weapon even further in exchange for its shorter range. Now that I'm thinking about it, it seems to me D6+1 is a tasteful damage characteristic for the heavy-hitting weapons, which often appear in multiples. But what is much more exciting is the Eternity Gate ability. Probably the coolest aspect of the monolith is its function as a dimensional portal-bearing fortress, one which now can pull a unit from either reserves or elsewhere on the board and set them up nearby. Note that those models do not need to be set up 9 inches away from enemy units, only within 6 inches of the monolith itself, and not within the engagement range of enemy units. And while those units which are set up do not get to charge, this still gives the sci-fi space pyramid huge utility. Very cool. Necron Warriors? Screw it, we're keeping it in. Have the stat line we would all expect. But their Gauss Flare seems stupid. I don't see how you could rule a Gauss Flare to have AP 0 if a bolt rifle has AP 1. This gets a stupid from me because it reads like GW is trying to get you to replace your old warriors with the newer warrior kits. Like the Gauss Flare needs to get within the range of the Gauss Reaper to have an equal number of shots, where it still then has worse AP and strength. If the Gauss Reaper costs a premium of points, it may be digestible. But of that, I am doubtful. However, the ability possessed by Necron Warriors is quite good. Warriors reanimate D6 over the default D3 right off the cuff, and if they are on an objective, they reanimate a spicy minimum 4 to a maximum of 6. Doomsday Cannon. Now here is a glow up, and a weapon change which I think clearly contextualizes my critique with the Tyranids Rupture Cannon. For clarity, let's compare it to the Rupture Cannon and the Space Marines Heavy Laser Destroyer. Admittedly, there is a wide variance of shots with the Doomsday Cannon, which in turn affects the damage potential. The variance of the damage potential appears to be as severe as the Rupture Cannons, and technically it is, but importantly, that wide variance isn't coming from random damage. It means that with this weapon, you can reliably point it towards elite infantry and know it will destroy a model right out. It means if you want to CP reroll a wound roll, you know it will have the impact you need, which cannot be said of the Rupture Cannon. And the new Doomsday Cannon still has the strength and AP to go into tough armor, able to even wound a monolith on 3s. And like the 2 other heavy weapons, if it's stationary it has +1 to hit, but what it offers uniquely is its potential for critical wounds to just deal 4 mortal wounds. Tremendous. And lastly, instead of the Silent King as our big cheese, in the preview we have the Void Dragon. Well really, just his spear. Unsurprisingly, it's good against vehicles. Well, that was my thought on the Necrons Faction Focus preview. Personally, I feel good about what we've seen here for the Necrons, though I would have liked to learn more about Catan powers. But I want to know your thoughts, especially the thoughts of those who command the Star God enslaving undead legions from space.